Breakfast Live on GTV. Today we relive history and we look at the links between our past and our present and what it will mean for our future. On May 25th, 1963, leaders from 30 of the then 32 independent African states signed a founding charter in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia, for the formation of the Organization of African Unity, OAU. The OAU was created to help bring about change, freedom and independence to many African countries. In 1991, the OAU established the African Economic Community, and in 2002, the OAU established its own successor, the African Union. Since the establishment of the OAU, a further 21 states have joined. South Africa became the latest and 53rd member on May 23rd, 1994. Today, 60 years of the African Union is being celebrated, and the hashtag is Our Africa, Our Future. All AU member states are expected, among other things, to showcase major successes, milestones, challenges, and the way forward under Agenda 2063, which would be the 100th birthday. But reflecting on the 60 years of African Union, we ask some questions. Why should a continent so rich in human and natural resources paradoxically be poor, with a vast population of Africans traveling to Europe and elsewhere to seek greener pastures? Today, we'll put those questions to two of our panel members. Professor Samuel Edu-Gyamfi is an associate professor at the Department of History and Political Studies at the Kwame Nkrumah University of Science and Technology, KNUST. He is joining us on our Zoom platform. Prof, good morning to you and hope you are well. Thank you for joining us. At the table, I have lawyer and historian Mr. Anoche Frimpong, who will also help us with some answers. Mr. Frimpong, welcome back.
Thank you, madam.
Once again, gentlemen, we are being called upon to remember where we are coming from as African and the people who really led the struggle to bring us to where we are. Professor Frimpong, recount that story to us about how we became the members of the African Union that we are today.
Thank you. It all started in 1958 when Ghana hosted about 8 African countries in in Accra. And the conference was Conference of Independent African States to lay down the blueprint for the achievement of independence for the more than 50 countries in Africa. As I said, at that time, it was less than 10 countries that were independent. And then the next 2 years, Ghana joined 6 other countries. In fact, 4 from the north: Algeria, Egypt, Libya, yes, and then Morocco, and 3 from West Africa: Ghana, Mali, Guinea, to form the Casablanca group, with the view to putting down structures for a future African state, so that these countries were prepared to sacrifice their own respective independence for a supra-African state. The following year, 1961, all the other countries, largely the French-speaking countries, met in Liberia, together with Liberia itself and then Nigeria, to form the Monrovia bloc, which was interested in nationalism. But at the end of it all, both blocs, whether Casablanca group or the Monrovia group, aimed at fostering independence and the sovereignty of the African people. And the outsider, in fact, the oldest country in Africa, the most experienced leader then, who had not joined either group, Haile Selassie of Ethiopia, brought them together, as you rightly said, 25th May 1963, and laid the foundation of the Organization of African Unity. At that meeting, it was the ideas of the Monrovia group that triumphed, that they will fight for independence. There will be nothing like continental unity, but the respect for each state, and then the formation and then bringing together of our culture, the societies, and then the economies, so that Africa will be a proud people. And above all is to bring down apartheid and ensure that all the African states had become independent. That is the beginning.
Have we harmed ourselves, or did we harm ourselves when our forebears did not accept the continental unity? It seems to have worked. The federal system appears to have worked for places like the United States, which is the number one example of federalism in the world. And of course, other countries are practicing same. Did we miss that opportunity when right at that foundation stage, we did not clamor together to pool our resources towards the collective good of the African people?
That's a great question. And I would answer through my lips, but the mind of Julius Nyerere. You know, he visited Accra before he died a couple of years later. And in the speech he delivered in Accra, he said that we harmed ourselves. He said that when America was fighting the United Kingdom for independence, even though it was made up of more than 50 states, just as Africa, their intention was to unite. And then we also have a United Kingdom. And then we have the biggest nation on earth, Russia. We have China, we have India. And even Europe has tried to come together, even though each of them standing alone would still be powerful, but they feel that they have to come together under EU. Having come together, they still have joined America to form NATO. And so if African states, as Nkrumah rightly put it, when they assembled in Addis Ababa in 1963, he told them that the fact that we come here and call ourselves African is the beginning of our unity. But not having done that, Nyerere says that, one, we don't have a common currency. America has a common currency that is ruling the world, the dollar. United Kingdom, a common currency. And then the EU has been able to bring the euro, a common currency. And then Nyerere said the truth that to date, many African countries have still got their umbilical cord tied to the former colonial masters. I don't have to use the in Africa, you say colonial master. Canada would never call any country colonial master. UK will not do, US will not do that. Australia will not. But we still say colonial master. They only came to colonize us. They are not our masters. But the truth is that all the French-speaking countries align with France. And it is the veritable truth that even before they attend an AU meeting, they will have to seek conference and clearance from France. It is only in Africa and among the French-speaking countries that do not have central banks of their own, because France makes billions of dollars every year printing the CFA currency for its former colonies. They select who should become a president in any African state that speaks French. So we have harmed ourselves.
The countries maintain that they are sovereign countries, and so the suggestions of their leanings to France are, according to them, just that, suggestion.
So it means that they still have not weaned themselves, because when somebody asks you a question and you don't know the answer and you say, I don't know, you have 50% passed, because it's not difficult for you to be taught the right thing. But when you insist that you are right, then you have a problem. Nobody can teach you. When you have a country richer than Ghana called Ivory Coast, and you do not have a central bank of your own, and your currency is dictated from outside, and the presidential mansion is owned by France, and you pay taxes every year, and you still think that you are a sovereign, then you have a problem. In fact, they are a de jure sovereign. De jure means by law, but de facto, in fact, they are not a sovereign. Go to Ivory Coast, the generals, everybody, they are French people, but that is not the aim of this meeting. The aim of this meeting is your question, whether we have harmed ourselves or not. And African leaders say that we have harmed ourselves. And that was a reason for the transformation of the OAU to AU. It was Gaddafi of Libya who in 1999 gathered the African leaders over there and felt that the OAU had failed. And the simple way of correcting yourself is just to look at the EU, how it had solidly integrated, and then politically, economically, socially, if you travel with a German passport to Italy, to Portugal, whatever, nobody will say anything. It's like being a member of that country. Does it happen in Africa? And so he engineered the process of transforming so that we will begin to be like them. And that was why 2002 we became AU. And still we have not got there. Ask yourself whether Ghana and Ivory Coast is trading. When even long before COVID was declared and then boundaries closed, Nigeria had already closed its border to Ghana, and then millions of cedis worth of goods getting damaged at the border.
So let me put my next question to Professor Aidoo Gyamfi of the KNUST. Prof, I'm sure that you've heard the submissions of our historian and lawyer at the table. Do you think that the African Union, which came into existence in 2002 until now, has been of any benefit to citizens of the continent? I'm tempted to make it to countries of the continent, but what have we as individuals felt that has been different, or that we would not have felt if we were not a part of this union? What's the benefit to us?
I mean, so I was enjoying myself anyway. I mean the submission. So okay. So fundamentally, I am of that strict view that it is good to have a union than to have nothing at all, a semblance of a union, so to speak, than to have nothing at all. I think that whether we like it or not, the union, semblance of a union, has been able to achieve something for itself. We have not gotten there yet, but it is better to have something like this to hope that we'll come back to it and from time to time make effort to engineer the processes that will let us get to the paradise we all anticipate going forward. Having said that, I think that we need to look at it from the angle of the consciousness of our leaders, so that in as much as we talk about a certain level of economic integration, political integration, or integration in the sense of security, Ghana as a country and its leaders, if you like, from Nkrumah up to date, have had some involvement, played a role in ensuring that we would have come thus far so far as the union is concerned. Senior talked about the United States of America, talked about Europe and other countries and all that. Fundamentally, the element of conservatism that drove the United States is what we missed, because the whole union, I believe, came on the back of Pan-Africanism that would or was interested in looking for an independent identity for Black people that would not be contingent upon European identity, or what today we refer to as the global North identity, and the kind of dictates that they put across for us to follow. Unfortunately, we could not get the kind of integration as anticipated, and that is exactly what my senior talked about, because the kind of integration wouldn't be possible because of the fundamental issues he alluded to. The question about lineage to the Anglophone, Francophone, Lusophone, and all the other things that we've talked about. And today, when they meet even as an African parliament, you see the sharp differences between them going toward their lineage as a result of differences in lingua franca. The balkanization of the African state, for that matter, as a result of European interests, the persistent interests of the West to propagate subtly or directly to break down our union through sponsorship of coup d'etat, what we call it, assassination of African leadership, yes. And I mean conscious African leaders like Nkrumah, Patrice Lumumba, and all the others that will emerge, including those persons the poet alluded to, and all that. So today we talk about gains in the sense of subtle integrations, because the charter and also the constitution of the AU has strong organs, I must say that, seeking to look for some forms of integration discussions in the area of science, technology, and all that. And there are a whole lot on their books and some forms of efforts that, we have seen taking place, apart from their conventions and meetings, right? But when we look at achievements, we would rather want to look at it from the fact that even though we would anticipate that the African Union, for example, will be interested in making a quick intervention when it comes to internal war or conflict within states. Unfortunately, the Constitution itself does not allow them to get involved in the sovereign state without, for example, issues like crime to humanity or questions about human rights breaches or war and all that, that would allow the African Union to make a direct intervention, so to speak, of getting involved. Because the African Union itself is mindful of the fact that it needs to respect the sovereignty of sovereign states, something the Western countries did not respect and shared our countries on piece of paper, balkanizing it. You would have part of areas in Ghana, in Zambia, Ivory Coast, and in Ghana, and all the other historical, if you like, blockages that we have seen. Interstate trade and all that have been a challenge, even when we look at the sub-regional groupings like ECOWAS and the South African bloc, the Eastern African bloc. They have not even seen the kind of gains that they would want to have seen. Talk about a broader continental integration in the state, in the sense of economics, right? So we have had some gains in spite of the challenges we have seen thus far. The sense of integration is what we have not had in the sense of what Nkrumah and the others were advocating for. But it is better to have a certain African Union that is seeking for a kind of integration than to have nothing at all. And when we want to leverage our gains, then we should begin to look at the questions around the G20 and say that there should be G21. Over 1.4 billion or so people in the continent must have a say on that table. This G20 cannot sit and continuously dictate for Africa. But the question we need to answer is the question about conscious African leaders. I shudder to say that the kind of leaders who have emerged after the Jomo Kenyatta, the Haile Selassies, the Kwame Nkrumahs, the Julius Nyerere, and the others, the kind of leaders who have emerged over the period. Yes, the early leaders have their own challenges. Maybe when we come to the table, we'll discuss that. But for us to be able to strengthen a union that will give us a kind of gains, inherently and intrinsically, we need to have leaders who are Pan-Africanists in that respective sense, who are conscious Africans and are seeking for independent African identity in economic, social-economic, economic, social, political, and even cultural sense. In that regard, we can come to the table well within the global market space and to make some gains. Having said that, I think it is better to be part of this union, so to speak, even if we are not satisfied with the kind of gains you have made thus far.
It's a lot to unpack, this conversation, because we are talking about the economics of it. We are thinking the barriers to our trade relationships. We've established the Africa Free Trade, Continental Free Trade Area here in Accra. Have institutions like that affected, or has it brought the bridge closer of us bridging the gap between this union that we conceptualize, or which our leaders conceptualize, as against the future where we see ourselves becoming, perhaps, if not right now, one day like the EUs and the USAs of the world? Has recent economic interventions like the AFTA program helped us in achieving some of these ideals?
If that question is to me, just to take a bit of it, fundamentally, we need to go back to the basics. So what they are doing with the free trade and all that, right, within the continent is the best idea. That is what will give us economic emancipation. But are we unfettered to the extent that we don't have Western inklings, subtle Western involvement to still dictate the pace of what we are trying to do here? That is the question we need to answer. Sometimes we even talk about this with some sense of securitization, because the leaders who might want to push for this in the strictest sense of it, that Africans will trade amongst themselves and they will be unfettered with unnecessary tariffs, unnecessary border closures, and all the encumbrances that come with it. If that will be ensured, then we can even look at trade in salt. We can look at trade in textiles. We can look at trade in food, and various items, right? From, finished products, semi-finished products, tertiary, and other forms of products within the continent. We are a continent that has 1.4 billion people. Look at the size of China, right? And look at the United States, for example. A pluribus unum, out of many one. There should be the element of conservatism in this trade bloc that we are creating. We have to be conservative to the extent that we use that to create a certain African identity, to block China, to block the West and the Americas and elsewhere from having direct kind of dictatorial tendencies to deviate the course we are trying to set for ourselves.
Quite bold there, Prof.
It is good on the piece of paper. It is a fantastic idea, but I shudder to say that the Western countries will not let us have the success we want. The so-called, if you like, developed economies will not allow us to have our say-so in this arrangement. My senior touch on this is very strong. Look, when you have the research of the so-called Francophone bloc still in France, and they don't even see anything wrong with that, when the West African bloc has even sought to look for ECHO as a kind of common currency, it has become a fiasco. Let me be frank with you. If something great will happen, we need conscious African leaders, not corrupt African leaders. We do not need leaders who are not altruistic or selfless. We do not need leaders who come to promise heaven and give us hell and overlook the social contract they have signed with the people who have been impoverished, the people who have been deprived for centuries. The kind of leaders we are producing from amongst us are leaders who will continue the servitude that was perpetuated on us centuries ago and which has continued within the neo-colonial construct which we have seen. So we talk about a certain economic bloc or union and a certain free trade in a textbook analysis within the realm of utopia. It is something that seems achievable, but unfortunately, the West is still lacking. And you need conscious African leaders who will take them boot for boot, and they will be willing to prosecute the developmental agenda within our sphere. Why, and you ask a very important question, why a rich continent in the sense of natural resource with impeccable human resource, trained within and without, but still we are unable to come to the table and to make sense of our own economic future in spite of the kind of ideals we are espousing with this free trade? It is because the West are still with us and they've never left us. And we need some conscious leaders who are willing to make a sacrifice, even to the peril of their own life.
Prof. James Fee, thank you for that submission. I'll put you on hold for a little while and I'll engage Anoche Frimpong. Quite bold statements being made by Professor James Fee on our Zoom platform. I'll invite our viewers to join our conversation. It's African Union Day today. What do you think Africa has done for you and what have you done for Africa? 055-5561034. Let's celebrate our own and see what more we can do to put this forward. So we've talked about the economic implications, the language barrier, the leanings that African countries have towards their European colonial powers because they are not masters, as you put them. But what can we learn from the conservatism that Prof mentioned that the US has, that Africa missed? And how can we raise that consciousness in our leaders? Should it be a national policy? Because both of you have talked about we need leadership to do this. But should it be the personal agenda of the African leader, today's African leader, like it was the personal agenda for the African leaders in the past to drive the change that we want to see? Or should it take another form?
Well, before I answer, let me praise the young professor. In fact, at the tail end of what he said, it was like Nkrumah standing there and preaching to the entire continent of Africa. I believe that when we have people like him coming from the academia, the journey would not be too long. We will get there. The consciousness this young man is talking about is what at the moment we are lacking from our African leaders. The question you ask, let's use our own country, Ghana, as an example. You see, when you go to the United States, and I'm saying this based on a conversation I had with the Minister for Education a couple of months ago, that he himself admitted that when you go to the US, the first 6 years of a child's education is to build consciously the history of the United States in the child. Then subsequent 6 years, the economics of that land. When you come to Ghana, the first 12 years of our education, ask yourself, what does the child know or from the syllabus about the history of the country? Nothing. But when you go to the Ghana system, where you come from, the Akan where I come from, we name our children after great ancestors, expecting that these ancestors will be remembered. Their death will not be in vain. And then two, we will be like them. So when you come to a country like Ghana, where history has been scrapped off completely, whereas in the 60s, the syllabus contained for primary and middle schools contained a subject called civics, where you learned African history, you learned it included that of Ghana, and then world history. So that by the time you get to secondary school, or you decide not to go to school at all, you know the history of Ghana and Africa, and you see somebody from Ivory Coast or Togo anywhere as your brother, and you know the problems of AU, and so you are ready to solve. Today, the African child does not know AU. And this day, which was a holiday in Ghana, has been scrapped off by the government for no apparent reason. And the sad, sinister story is the fact that today, as we sit here, is the 60th anniversary of the formation of the OAU. And you know the man who made it all happen was a Ghanaian, Kwame Nkrumah. And that was why we, like many African countries, instituted 25th May as not just AU Day, we call it African Day. African Day, and then you've taken it off. Whereas even the UN recognizes African Day and came together with the AU to choose the theme for this year, our Africa, our future. And so to start with from Ghana, the African leaders are dead. Look from north to the south. You do not see anybody who is Pan-Africanist enough to carry on with the fight. And so if things will be better, first of all, let us have a change of syllabus. Second, let us recognize African leaders that really sowed the seed. And from there, we can nurture a new leadership. Otherwise, we'll continue to fail.
What has the day not been declared a public holiday, or what has the holiday over the years until it was truncated, what did it add to our lives as Africans? Did it give us an opportunity to be more African? And what, now that it's been taken away, what have we lost?
Thelma, you see, if you heard the professor, even though, just as I did, he lambasted the AU, he said the fact that we have a union in existence, that is something to be proud of. And indeed, he is right, because Africa with the AU for a very long time has had a single voice at the UN. And so having that holiday was enough for young people to ask elderly ones, why do we have this day as a holiday? But today is not a holiday, so no, he won't ask that question, and so he won't be given any answer. So it is a very, very big dent. And I believe going back, once you don't have a Pan-Africanist leader, you don't have an African focus. Because if you live in Africa, where you are asking for a mere $3 billion US, $3 billion from IMF, and for about a year, that amount of money had delayed in coming. And still,
others spend longer at the table with the IMF and the money still haven't come. We
I'm
went
getting there.
with
I'm getting
some
there.
others who still don't
Very
have
good.
theirs.
I'm getting there. And for about a year, the loan delayed, and still your economy survived. It was a way of God telling you that, hey, my friend, always think of making it yourself. And as you interjected by giving me an answer I needed, that others spent years and did not get, and still the economies have not evaporated. You should think of building your own foundation. Seek ye first the political kingdom, the rest shall be added unto it. It also means that do not link yourself to China, Russia, America, UK, or France. Ivory Coast has the most fertile land in West Africa and could have been the richest country in Africa, except for the fact that whatever that is generated from that country goes to France. And the sad thing is that if the Ivorian wants to, or Senegalese, Togolese want to import goods from outside, high tariffs from non-French made goods. So when you go to Ivory Coast, the Toyota Land Cruisers and German cars you see here are almost non-existent, because you will pay 3 to 5 times the amount for a Toyota Land Cruiser if you would not import Citroën, Peugeot from France. So France, and for that matter, the former colonial powers are powers that know that even before they manufacture goods, they have a place where they would dump them and begin to count their profits before the goods are manufactured. That is Africa. Now talk about Africa, where we produce all the materials, the raw materials for the manufacturing of everything that Europe and America need. Talk about uranium. You are talking about Russian-Ukraine war. Everything is coming from Africa. If it is not Niger, it is Congo. And so they had to ensure that there was constant and continuous instability on our continent. And for as long as there is instability here, some people somewhere are always enjoying.
You are suggesting that there is some attempt, and it's a widely held perception that so long as there is no unity, people will continue to use our divisions against us. So what are we as Africans? Have we caught on to that plan? And have we taken the necessary steps to ensure that we don't see ourselves as separate units, even as separate sub-regions? Because we see developments in one block and less in others. We see developments in one country but not in others. Have we ourselves noticed what the problem is when it comes to the hands we think are trying to divide us? And I'll put this question to both you and the professor online. And what have we done about it? We can't keep crying foul if we do not take the medicines that will make us better and cure our ailments.
Well, my answer, my part is that by and large, the African academia has deciphered the problem. You talk to academicians and they all believe that this is the panacea. Unfortunately for Africa, we have not had the right leadership. So the African politician is different from the African scholar. And I believe that by and large, the scholars too who have become politicians have been adulterated. But in books, in papers, we have always known that this is the way we are supposed to go. In practice, we have not done that. So a further answer is that one day we are going to get there. One day we are going to get there. Because those of us who believe in religion also believe that there is no condition that is permanent. From the day that the Berlin Conference started up to today, we have been on one side. I believe that one day we will be on another side, because even the Roman Empire fell. So whatever that is militating against our progress would fall. We've got young people, the young poet, Tete, who spoke, the professor who spoke. We know a lot of millions of Africans who believe in true African emancipation. And we know the panacea, except that we have not elected the right leaders. One day the right leaders will come to be, and Africa will be free forever.
Prof, is hope enough?
Yes.
Is hope enough?
Yes, it is. That is what the Nkrumahs and the others projected for us, to look onto that freedom, that future that was both political, social, economic, among other things. In a sense, he was drawing our attention to the fact that the Africanization of whatever we have meant that Africans should be able to dictate their own future. So that was hope. Hope does not mean that there will not be challenges. Hope does not mean that there will not be bottlenecks. It is up to us to come back to the question about consciousness. Today, do we see some continuities or we have seen more discontinuities? In the textbook analysis, like Mr. Frimpong talked about my sin, and thanks very much, Mr. Frimpong, for the very kind words. It's really encouraging, right? It's very critical to appreciate the fact that when you look into the textbooks, when you look into the research we have done and all that, everything points towards the fact that we have the answers. We have indigenous knowledge systems and strategies and tools. We've had a lot of cooperation, even on the African Union bloc, scientific cooperation, technical cooperation on various fronts. We only need that kind of African leadership that is conscious, that is a Pan-Africanist leadership that will hold on them to look to the future. My background is Christianity. Like an old Jewish prophet, I would say that looking onto the future, that is both altering and finalizing same, we need not be afraid of the kind of challenges that we'll face on the way, but we are likely to sit on the right-hand side of the makers and breakers of the destinies of the world. When we are not careful to unite and to look to hope, and we throw our hands up in despair, what is going to happen is that China, they are not only here, but they are here to also take their bit of it. The headquarters building of the AU, was it built by Africans? Was it engineered by Africans themselves? I ask you a question. That's what I'm talking about, conscious African leaders. If we are not talking about hope today, China will take over Africa. Today, Russia is strong and alive in Africa. United States is trying to hold on to its own in Africa.
Professor Frimpong, we are trying to reconnect the Zoom platform with you again, but I would have wanted to hear the end of the submission. Today's African... Prof, are you still with us?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you now. Continue. We'll hear your final
words. So I'm saying that we need to hold on to the hope that we have. Hope for the future. As I speak to you, there's a power outage. I'm hoping our generator will come up, our plant will come up, right? We are in Africa with a lot of sunlight. We have not been able to utilize it in terms of our scientific cooperation and all that. So we need to hold on to hope. I'm answering the question. When we overlook hope, right, which is a title deed we are holding, and hoping that with that title deed, we can occupy our economic space that the title deed tells us that we have.
But what is hope without action, Prof? Because our leaders had hope 60 years ago. They followed up and did certain key things that made sure that today there are more independent countries in Africa than others. Yes, even with conflicts and even with famine and health issues.
Yes, but what I'm saying is that when we come to the table like this, where we are not celebrating an AU day today in Ghana, we are wiping away even that hope. You see, the point is that when we talk about hope, what we are saying is that there is still something we can hold on to until the better future comes. And that better future is in the African youth. That better future, the conscious African youth, that better future means that we need not have a certain Paul Biya as the leader of Cameroon. That, in fact, that hope and that future means that we should not only have old men coming to lead. You see, we need both black and white keys. We need old men. The old men should see their future in the young men. The young men are seeing their visions through the dreams of the old men. And if the old men are still in our presidential houses and they are sleeping on the job, and corrupt, if you like, appendages and corrupt persons are appointed to work with them, then we cannot hold on to the hope. But I can tell you this, I will not sit here and say that we cannot hold on to hope, because that is the only left for me as an African young man. That is the only thing left for me, that we, the younger generation in Africa, will be interested in holding on to the future and taking the bull by the horn. We will not rely on even the current presidents we have, but we will hold on to the emerging future leadership of Africa.
As part of holding on to the new crop of leaders that we will have in future, my final question to you, what's the Africa you want to see, Prof?
I want to see that type or kind of Africa that is conscious, Africa for Africans. I can move to Cote d'Ivoire without being harassed on the way. I can move to Nigeria, to Benin, to Togo, to South Africa without being worried about a South African thinking that I'm not a South African. I am looking forward to that future in Africa when we have pandemic. We will not wait for the West to give us vaccines and test it and say that it is good, use it, and tell us that our neem leaves will not work, and tell us that the old ways, strategies that African scientists have put in place will not work. That when Madagascar, the Madagascars are making effort to also solve a COVID quandary, so to speak, we will not be afraid to use it and to test it, to tinker. And for that future will come when you have conscious Africans who will rally behind their conscious African leaders and say that we will test our own medicines, even when we would die by testing it, than for the West to test their medicines on us. I'm looking for that future that is not bleak, that is not, if you like, sham, and that is not dictated by the West. I'm looking for that future that is based on Africa for Africans, directed and dictated by Africans. That is the future I'm looking up to.
Thank you, Prof, for adding your thoughts. And I'll take the final words from you, Mr. Frimpong. We've seen African voices increasing across the world, and Africa increasingly having more of a say. Recently, when the Vice President of the U.S. was in Ghana and she toured other countries in Africa, she made mention of the fact that the world is looking forward to digitalization and the digital solutions that will come from Africa. Are we at a point where we are bold to say no to the parts of this mutual collaborations with other countries? And when can we be able to step up for ourselves and say we will take this but not that? Are we even able to make that call? And then perhaps what's the Africa you want to see, like I asked Prof?
The Africa I would want to see is Africa with one voice. And the way we have been maltreated for more than 2-3 centuries is enough for the African to get awakened. So the raw material for our unity and progress are already there. The first one being the fact that having followed the West, Africans now know we have achieved nothing. After the president of Ghana went to the UN to vote against Russia, at the end of it all, what did the US do in helping him get the 3 billion he needed? In fact, he could have, the US president alone, standing there without turning back, could have given Ghana $50 billion.
But it wasn't the personal decision of the president.
All that we are saying is that Congress. African leaders by now have realized, following China, following Russia, following NATO, and for that matter, US, will not give you anything. They have realized that. And the young ones who have seen it. The second one is that we do not need Kamala Harris to talk to us about digitalization. We do not need that. You see, when you go to Europe, the place is so dead silent that without a television in your room, you can end up dying, because this is individualistic life. The African is always communal. So if the African hasn't got television The African hasn't got a problem. So the sort of scientific advancement they are talking about, we don't need it. The African does not need nuclear weapons because Africans do not see anybody as our enemies. It is the West that sees Russia as utter enemy, utterly, completely. And Russia does the same thing. Africans do not see anybody as enemy. So we do not need to develop along their lines. But what we need to do is to learn from them. Every currency has got something backing it. You go to UK and they've got gold, the largest deposit of gold backing the pound. Africa has got the largest deposit of minerals yet untapped. I need leaders who will sit down and see ways of using an African minerals to back an African currency, so that if Russia is talking about its currency, the China is talking about the yuan, dollar, whatever, Africa too will sit comfortably without the need to talk about them. Why? Because there will be a genuine intra-African trade. I see onions and tomatoes coming from Burkina Faso and Niger, and I become very happy. And I want to see cocoa-made products also going there, timber-made products from Cameroon and Ghana going this way, goods from Ivory Coast going that way. Nigeria is now producing a heavy amount of rice. Ghana has got the same breed of land.
They've just got an oil refinery built by Aliko Dangote.
Dangote. So if we can learn from Europeans how they traded among themselves, even Europe that hated Russia, it was Russia supplying them energy until the Russian-Ukraine war. So that alone should tell you that in reality, our independence should be a form of interdependence and should be able to kick out the colonial powers that have always sought to disintegrate us in order to rule us.
For the man on the street, it has always been bread and butter. How do I get a job so that I get enough coming in? There were, at the time of independence job, 600 other ideas that were peddled. Today, people face the same issue and they ask themselves, if I don't have a job, if I can't feed myself and my family, why am I thinking about Africa when even within my own nuclear family, I'm not able to make it? What should Africa Union mean to me who does not have a job?
You see, implicitly you have answered the question. So at the time of independence, you were talking about Job 600. Let me quickly say to viewers that it was meant to be the AU headquarters, OAU headquarters. Nkrumah wanted it to be here. But we were able to achieve all these things. Job 600, Kwame Nkrumah will go and find that they were built by the State Construction Corporation. Today they are inexistent. When we had independence, Nkrumah realized that
Job 600 is currently where we have the
Parliament House.
Parliament House, and so you can see that on your screen now.
When Nkrumah gave us independence, he realized that 1, population was increasing, 2, school education going up, and 3, University College of the Gold Coast becoming University of Ghana, Cape Coast, and then Kumasi universities having been added to that. So everybody becoming educated. What did he do? He quickly set up an agricultural policy because he felt that it is only the land that God has given to us free, a wonderful vegetation and the sun, and we had to make good use of that. So almost every industry he set up was agro-based. Luckily, God has not taken the land away. Luckily, America and China have not taken our lands away. The things you go to China shops to buy, the things you import from China, is it toilet roll, is it sardine? We have got everything here in Ghana and in Africa. So the time has come for the leadership to think of collecting money from there, all right, but the money should be investment money, investment loan, instead of supporting balance of payment deficits. If you are talking about investment, like you mentioned, Dangote, then Africa will be able to create jobs for the ordinary people in the street. How do I send my son to university, come up, and then national service? You see this, my son, standing by the roadside like a policeman directing traffic, when we have huge arable land in the Volta region, which can support rice farming, or Techiman, yam farming. And yam has been diagnosed to be more nutritious than potato. So that when next time you go to KFC, you don't find potato chips over there, but yam or cassava chips. That means we need to change even our taste, and that comes from leadership.
Friend Paul, thank you so much for making time for our conversation on African Union Day today. We've spoken to Professor Samuel Edu-Gyamfi, who is an associate professor at the Department of History and Political Studies at the Kwame Nkrumah University of Science and Technology, KNUST. In-house, almost, we've adopted him almost, historian and lawyer, Mr. Anoche Frimpong, also adding his voice to our chat. Thank you so much, gentlemen, for making the time. We hope that you picked up a few things today as Africa celebrates its own. We are celebrating our union and the things that bind us together. Let me send belated birthday shouts to Auntie Cho. You are also called Mrs. Catherine Chocho Lamte. 90 years, we celebrated your birthday on Wednesday. And also to the daughter of our superstar at the table, Oscar Provençal, Sherian, you also celebrated your birthday also on Wednesday. And all the Maybons in this family, we are sending massive birthday shouts to Emmanuel Ni Holmes Live from the Ablo family and all the team members of Baba Sadiq. You know the Okaikwe people. Baba Sadiq and his team say happy birthday to you, Emmanuel Ni. And for all of you who celebrate, we wish you well. Today is African Union Day. Make it a point to learn one fact about Africa that you did not know today. Make it a point to read about one African leader that you have not read about today. And if you have the opportunity, share the African story to one person who does not know about it today. Let's put our best foot forward today. Africa is for me and you and will forever remain with us. Let's make each other proud out there. It's Africa Union Day. Congratulations to you. We'll be back after this break.